This is the herringbone stitch. There are several different stitch patterns called herringbone. Some of them look like this fabric that I have here, and some do not. This particular method that I'm going to show you today uses the twice knit knitting technique that I did the video on a few months ago. This produces a nice, thick, dense fabric. And you can use any number of stitches that you like. Today I'll be working with 12 stitches. I'm using size 11 needles, and the yarn is Araucania Azapa, and this is just a 2-row repeat. For the first row, you're going to be knitting into the back loops of all of the stitches. And you're going to be working with 2 stitches at a time. You're going to be knitting each stitch twice. So it's a lot easier than it might sound. So first row, knitting into the back loops of your first 2 stitches here. And you're only going to drop this first stitch off your left needle. You're going to leave the second stitch on, and you're going to knit through that one as well as your third stitch. So always working with 2 stitches. And you're going in through the back loop, knit, drop that first stitch only. Through the back loops, drop only the first stitch. And that's what you're going to do for the entire row. And because this particular stitch makes a thick, dense fabric, you could use a thinner yarn with bigger needles, and your fabric wouldn't be as loose or holey as it would normally if you were just doing, say, garter stitch or stockinette stitch. And it actually works up pretty fast. So when you get to your last stitch, you're just going to knit it as you normally would. Here are my last 2, going in through the back loops, dropping that first stitch, and then my remaining stitch, just knit it as you normally would. Now on the reverse row, you're going to be purling 2 together and only dropping off the first stitch, just like you did with your knit stitches, knitting each one of these twice. So purl 2 together, drop only the first loop off the needle. And you would continue doing that all the way across the row. Oops, there we go. So when you get to the last stitch on your purl row, you would just purl it as you normally would. Okay, here are my last 2, dropping off the first, and 1 stitch remains. Just purl it as you normally would. And you would just repeat those 2 rows for your fabric.